All right, well, here we're back, Healing by Design. We're chronic fatigue. Actually, by the end of May, we're going to be to D. So it's just a lot of C's. So anyway, chronic fatigue. All right, so let me pray. All right, Father, we are thankful for this time and this moment. Thank you for the people that have chosen to come here in their busy schedules, Lord. And just pray that you'd teach us more about understanding the human body, understanding sickness and disease, understanding you and your healing power to a greater extent. And we ask that you would teach us how to align with you and your heart, Lord, so that we could live in fullness of what you called us to do on this earth. So we pray in Jesus' name, amen. So chronic fatigue syndrome, I don't know, it's funny doing this series of classes because I get so used to saying the same thing over and over again. I almost felt with this class, I have to be real intentional about saying it in a way that maybe this is the only class anyone has ever seen, with this type of understanding. And so I think with this chronic fatigue syndrome, that's probably important because, there's thousands and thousands of people all around the country and probably all around the world getting this type of diagnosis, chronic fatigue syndrome. And so, as part of my intro, as I normally do, I will say, as always, that this was not God's intention for us to have fatigue, or chronic fatigue, or debilitating fatigue to the point where we can barely even function as human beings. Clearly was not God's intention or design. And again, a lot of people are having these types of issues, so the question is, why? A lot of people want to know why they have health issues or fatigue. But really more importantly, what's the answer? What's the solution? How do I feel better? How can I function? How can I get out of bed in the morning? How can I feel like it's a struggle just to make it through the day? And so again, with a lot of people with this type of diagnosis, it's really a struggle. It's really a struggle. So the truth is, and the reality is that I believe that all sickness and disease is a misalignment with God's design, a misalignment with the natural created order of how He designed us and intended us to live on this earth. Because again, if we believe God, we believe He's good, we believe everything in the Bible, why would we be so debilitated where we can barely even function and make it throughout the day? That doesn't even make sense. We know that's not our God. That wasn't His intention. And the reality is that we've stepped away from how God designed us to live on this earth. We're not exclusively choosing God and the things of God, not even close. I often talk about, food and nutrition, but it comes in various areas of our life. So when we have these types of issues going on, I think it's important that we take ownership of it. We take responsibility of it. A lot of people don't know what's going on. They get a diagnosis, and somehow that makes them happy that they got this diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, which means absolutely nothing, right? That there's no meaning behind chronic fatigue except for the fact that you're really tired. But we have to take ownership and responsibility of what's going on. And just getting a diagnosis doesn't do that. We have to change and correct the issue. And something I feel like I want to mention is a lot of times when we're struggling, we kind of feel like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why do my friends seem okay, but I'm struggling with these types of issues? It's just the reality of a broken world. I don't know how else to say it. It's the reality of a broken world. So we're to blame because of the choices we made in our life. We can blame the enemy. We can blame because he's deceived us all into making all the wrong choices. We can blame our parents and our grandparents because they certainly made a lot of wrong choices. We can blame the food industry because they're messing us all up. We can blame the pharmaceutical industry. We can blame a whole lot of people, but ultimately when it comes to health, we always have to accept responsibility regardless of our past, regardless of our history, and choose. So that's what I love to say when I teach about health and wellness, is that everything is an opportunity to choose God and to choose the things of life and to choose the author of life, because he's bigger than any sickness or disease, right? He's bigger than our past, the mistakes we've made, the mistakes our parents have made, the mistakes the pharmaceutical industry has made. But if we continue to make mistakes, if we continue to choose man-made things and we don't choose God, we'll continue down this same path. So that's my heart mostly in these teachings, is to help people choose a different path, to realize that it's the man-made path of the wrong choices that have resulted in these types of issues, and choosing God and the things of God will heal the body and will restore life. So, chronic fatigue, what does that mean? What does that mean? Can anybody tell me? Like, what's chronic fatigue mean?
All the time you're tired.
It means you're really tired. Exactly. See, you're already a doctor. All right? So, you know, there's a few of these diagnoses that are really bothersome to me. I don't really like any diagnosis. I mean, it's kind of nice to know what's going on with your body, but to get a diagnosis like this basically doesn't help you with anything. You don't need a doctor to tell you that you're really tired, right? You need a doctor that can actually tell you how to get better, right? How to feel better. The problem with a diagnosis in our world today is it's a diagnosis that allows a doctor to offer a method of treatment and to prescribe drugs and medications. Because without a diagnosis, they can't do that. So a lot of these diagnoses are basically made up so that they can now administer some type of a treatment or a drug for that specific issue. Because chronic fatigue is one of those confusing things that there's no real clear markers for it. They don't have a good test for it. They don't have blood work that shows that you have chronic fatigue. And so what they do is they kind of come up with a set of symptoms, and they label people these things, that they accept these labels, which is really bad when you accept a label of anything. But they accept these labels of something that doesn't really mean much, but really they do it in order to prescribe you a drug. And so I use some of the information straight off of the Mayo Clinic, because everybody loves the Mayo Clinic and they respect the Mayo Clinic, and anybody who's really sick goes to the Mayo Clinic. Well, they don't really know much about sickness and disease either. And I'm going to kind of show that through this one. I don't know why I decided to pick on the Mayo Clinic today, but I just did. But it's because they have definitions of all these diseases, and they go through like what it is and the symptoms and all that. And to me, reading this, it's almost comical. But at the same time, it's devastating to see the way they word things and the way they mislead people and the way they don't give people any knowledge or wisdom or truth about how to get better. That's what's really sad. And so they do talk about how there's no test to really confirm it, that the criteria is basically a list of symptoms. Now I'm going to tell you the list of symptoms that they use for chronic fatigue. Number 1, loss of memory or concentration. Okay, who struggle with that? Like all of us, right? Yeah, see, I already see the hands going up. Sore throat, enlarged lymph nodes in your neck or armpits. Now, why don't I just stop right there? What does that mean? Yeah, you're congested. You got an issue. You're fighting something. There's something going on. So, if they would just expand on that, they might help a few people. But they don't even touch that. But it's one of the symptoms. Unexplained muscle pain. Pain that moves from one joint to another, and there's swelling or redness. Headaches. Unrefreshing sleep. A lot of people struggle with sleep. Extreme, and so there's 8 symptoms that they list. This is what they look for. They use this to label a person with this type of illness. And the last one is extreme exhaustion lasting for more than 24 hours after physical or mental exercise. And they usually want, for the diagnosis, for somebody to have persistent fatigue issues for 6 months or longer. So that's kind of the trademark symptom, is that you've had fatigue for 6 months or longer with no explanation of it. And then they go into the causes. And this is what I find is really pretty fascinating about it. And here's their wording. Scientists don't know exactly what causes chronic fatigue syndrome. That's true. Scientists probably don't know that. It's a combination of factors, and they list 3 factors. The first one they say is viral infections. Some people develop chronic fatigue after having viral infections. Researchers question whether some viruses might trigger the disorder. They talk about Epstein-Barr virus, human herpes virus, and some other things. But then they say no conclusive link yet has been found. Number 2, they say immune system problems. Remember we just talked about swollen lymph nodes, right? Immune system problems. The immune systems of people who have chronic fatigue syndrome appear to be impaired slightly. But again, they say, it's unclear if this impairment is enough to actually cause the disorder. And then the third thing they see is hormonal imbalances. Again, this is straight off the Mayo Clinic. People who have chronic fatigue syndrome also sometimes experience abnormal blood levels of hormones produced in the hypothalamus, pituitary glands, or adrenal glands. But the significance of these abnormalities is still unknown. You notice how in every statement they give a possible scenario, but they also claim ignorance in the same sentence? Oh, we don't really know. Scientists don't really know. There's really no proof. I mean, this is the whole thing that's been going on with the medical industry versus natural health from the beginning. You know, them claiming that there's no proof or understanding or whatever. So here's what's crazy and ironic about this. Is they're absolutely right. I mean, those are the 3 things. Those are the 3 things that people are struggling with chronic fatigue. They know this. They know people have hormonal issues. They know their cortisol levels are off, or their DHEA, or you can look at all the different steroid hormones, see that those are off. They can tell that people, you know, they get viruses, they get infections, and then sometimes they're never the same after that. That's when people really start to struggle long term. It's almost like the straw that broke the camel's back when they get an infection because their body was already weak. And so it's just interesting that they mention the viral infections, the weak immune system, the hormones, and again, they're correct in this. The issue is their complete lack of understanding, which I use the term ignorance, and I don't mean that in a bad way, in a purposeful or intentional way. It's really a lack of understanding is what ignorance is. It doesn't mean the person's not smart, but it's ignorance on part of the medical community to understand how to get people better. And so right after they give you what's actually true and what actually causes chronic fatigue syndrome, they give you the medication options. There's 2. What do they give you? Any ideas? Just curious if anybody has any thoughts. They only give 2 options. One is antidepressants. So you have a hormone issue or an immune system issue, you need an antidepressant. I mean, tell me the logic in that. And if anybody's known anybody with chronic fatigue syndrome, they're on antidepressants very often. Because you know what? If your body's not working right and you're sluggish all the time and you're fatigued and you have no drive and no motivation and don't want to get out of bed, you're probably going to get depressed. But that's not a solution. You don't give somebody an antidepressant. And then the second thing they recommend, and here's what they say, which is crazy about it. Treating your depression can make it easier for you to cope with the problems associated with chronic fatigue syndrome. The second thing they offer is sleeping pills. That's it. That's all they got. Therapy. They actually recommend exercise. That's cool. I like that. Then the second thing they recommend is psychological counseling. Because clearly, if you have an immune system problem or a viral infection, you need psychological counseling. Right? So I know we're kind of laughing, but if somebody has these issues, like these things are real. Like they're really struggling with day-to-day life. They're really struggling with depression. They're really struggling with these things. And so often the medical community resorts to these type of treatments, psychological treatments and antidepressants. And you know how many people, like I even heard it just last week. I mean, I've heard this for decades. I mean, I haven't heard this for decades. I've known this for years. They've been doing this for decades. But telling people that their symptoms or their illness or what they're telling them is what? All in their head. All in their head. What does that mean when a doctor tells you that?
Makes you more depressed.
It makes you more depressed. And what does that tell you about the doctor?
He's a quack.
He doesn't know anything. Yeah, he's a quack. I would vouch for that. I mean, if any doctor tells you that, he shouldn't have a license, in my opinion. Because it's his pride, it's his ignorance, it's his lack of real education that would have him tell you something like that. Telling people that what they're feeling and what they're experiencing isn't real. It's like the worst possible thing you could ever tell somebody. And it's because they don't know. They don't have a clue. So, yeah, that really bothers me when they tell people stuff is all in their head. So what is chronic fatigue? Chronic fatigue is a lack of energy in the body, organs, and cells. The example I give people is I like to give people examples that maybe you can get a visual on it. Okay, the body is like a factory, or like an engine in the car, or a factory that produces goods. It's kind of a machine. Your body's like a machine. We could refer to our body as a machine. Things go in the body, they get processed. Some things are good, some things are bad. The body has to eliminate waste, and the body produces energy. An engine does that, a car engine does that, right? A factory does that. Your body's the same. So whether you're going to feel good and whether you have energy really depends on how well your factory's working. So again, you go back to the causes, hormonal imbalances, immune system issues, viral infections. These things can mess up our factories. So we have to look at how are we treating our factories? What are we putting into our bodies? And so this lack of energy in the body at the cellular level comes down to the environment in which the body is functioning. The cells, are they happy? Are they healthy? Do they have a good playground? Do they have water and minerals and vitamins and oxygen and the things that they need? When people with chronic fatigue syndrome, they don't have those things. They have a lot of toxins and waste and junk and old waste built up that the body can't remove and get rid of. It's suffocating the cells. So there's no life force there. It's a toxicity issue. Or the hormones aren't working right. You're not producing DHEA, which is the joy hormone, or you're not producing serotonin or dopamine, which gives you drive and energy and motivation, or adrenal hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so those are some of the main factors that we have to look at. And so if you look at the factory example, and this is where I said, we can blame the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, our parents, we can blame whoever you want, but ultimately, the hand you've been delt's the hand you've been dealt. and you got to find God in it. You really do. You just got to find God in it. And we have to change the way we're treating our bodies or our factories. And so car engine is a simple example. It might sound silly, but you can try to save money and do half gasoline, half water in your car and try to save some money, and it's not going to work very well. And what are we doing to our bodies? We're not putting the things God designed into the human body. We're wondering why it's not functioning. We're wondering why it's failing. We're wondering why Doritos and Cheez-Its and candy and soda pop and these kind of things are destroying the human body. So it's usually one of the first things anybody with chronic fatigue syndrome should change, if they're not, is their diet. And we'll talk more about that. But it's really all about diet. And you notice if you go through all the Mayo Clinic's information, not once do they talk about really nutrition. They mention exercise, but they don't talk about nutrition. They don't talk about cleansing. They don't talk about detox. They don't talk about how to balance your hormones. They don't talk about any of that. They give you 2 drug options and maybe go see a psychologist. So this is why people aren't getting better. This is why people are struggling with these types of issues. So the main primary, I think it's different with every person. But again, I want to highlight those main things: the hormone imbalances and the infection immune system issues. It's one and or both of those issues. Most people, it's both of those issues. Okay, because if you don't have adrenals and you're not producing hormones, you're not going to have energy. And if your body's congested and toxic and full of infections, I don't know what I was doing with my finger there, but if your body's congested and toxic and it's not working right, you're going to have fatigue. And those combination of two things are really bad. So that's the area we need to focus on. A couple of things we can look at. We'll start with the adrenals. So if I have lots of recordings and teachings on the adrenals. I have a free audio recording that was like a 2-hour audio recording I did on the adrenals. Let me just say this. Anybody who's chronically fatigued, whether you've been given that label or not, you absolutely have to work on your hormones. No exception. Because what drives energy in the body is the ability of the adrenals, the thyroid, and the hormonal system to work and function properly. So anybody who's fatigued needs to work on their hormones. And I'll mainly focus on the adrenals. It would also include the thyroid. Pituitary is kind of the master gland that controls them all. But I'll mainly focus on the adrenals because I think it's the most important. Because anybody who's struggled with adrenal fatigue, it's not often labeled in the medical community because they only recognize Cushing's disease and Addison's disease, and that's like total adrenal collapse and failure. But if you're tired, let's just say, even if it's not chronic, like if you just struggle with being tired all the time, there's a hormone issue. There's absolutely a hormone issue. So some of this information's from a guy I know and I work with, and he's a doctor, and he has his own product line, but he's real big on nutrition, and he talks about adrenals a lot and hormonal issues, and he talks a lot about sodium and salt deficiencies, and I've talked about this a lot in my classes too. This was the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is 1995, 05-15, so over 20 years ago. They found that almost everybody with chronic fatigue had low blood pressure. That's a common symptom of adrenal fatigue, is low blood pressure. A lot of people have low blood pressure. I see people all the time, low blood pressure, all the time. It's a sign of adrenal fatigue. They evaluated 19 patients, and they gave these 19 patients sodium or salt. It said all of them improved with their symptoms, and half of them, for their most part, their symptoms vanished. So people with chronic fatigue got better just by doing salt, because salt's a crucial electrolyte mineral, and people are chronically dehydrated, and the adrenals run on water and salt's crucially important to human function, and people use up salt, especially if they exercise a lot or sweat a lot, or they're chronically stressed or anxious. That burns salt out of the system because it burns out the adrenals, and we just really need to replace salt oftentimes. And so that is one simple thing you can do for the adrenals and do for chronic fatigue that can just bring people back to life. I like the salt stones, the Himalayan salt stones. You can add them to water. The ones we use are by NHI, but you can just add them to water, let it sit for 24 hours. You got salt water. You put a teaspoon in a glass of water in the morning when you wake up, and gives people energy, clears up brain fog, makes them feel better. So it's just one simple little thing you can do. The other thing I like for low blood pressure, and again, I just have to refocus, chronic fatigue syndrome, check your blood pressure. It's probably low, most likely. Licorice root. Licorice root's really good for adrenal fatigue. It's good to increase blood pressure. You don't want to take licorice root if you have high blood pressure, but you want to take licorice root if you have low blood pressure. It's actually one of the best things you can do for low blood pressure. Those are the two best things I know for low blood pressure, and two things that can really help the adrenals out is the licorice and the salt. So I wanted to highlight that. Other things, I'll talk about a few more things about adrenals just because it is so important related to this topic of chronic fatigue. You have to support those hormones. Like I've learned in working with people for years now, and having people like try different nutrition changes and cleanses and different things that if you don't support the hormones, your chances of success go down because the person just feels junky. They feel tired, they feel depressed, they don't have any energy, they don't have any life force. So why eat good or, try to do the right things or cleanse, if your mindset's not there because you don't feel good, because you don't have energy. And so I find that supporting hormones really helps people make it through a healing process. And it just brings life force back. So I'll share with you some of the favorite things that I've used for adrenals, because anybody with chronic fatigue has to work on their adrenals. Let me talk food first and nutrition. This is probably a number one most important thing. And everybody's in a different place when it comes to nutrition. Again, everybody's been dealt a different deck depending on genetics and how they lived growing up and different factors. But in general, let me tell you what really, really, really stresses out the adrenal glands more than anything else. What's the guess?
Sugar.
You guys hit them all. So we'll start with sugar and grains. I kind of lump them together. Okay, sugar and grains are complex, starchy carbohydrates, complex sugar molecules. They stress out the adrenals. They cause cortisol release. They cause that weight gain around the middle that a lot of people don't like or they find unpleasant. From stress, from cortisol release, from eating foods that stress the adrenals. One of the reasons that they stress the adrenals so much is they're complex in nature, which means the body has to break them down into simple sugars, and the process of breaking those down creates acid waste that the body has to deal with. And so that's extra stress on the body, a lot of acid waste. And then I called it, when I was in my 20s, I kind of basically lived in it, but when I went to lunch every day, I couldn't figure out why the afternoon was so hard and I was so tired and so exhausted and I could barely even function. And it's because for lunch every day I usually ate pizza or pasta or bread or something like that, and I call it a carbohydrate coma. So it's like when you eat starches and grains and sugars, everybody's getting away from that stuff today. Why? Well, for 100 reasons, 100 different reasons. But it bogs your body down. It taxes your system. It sends your system into a state of, like, how do I even handle all of this complex sugars that I have no use for? We used to have use for those things. We used to run around and be active and be working in the field all day and sweat and actually work hard. Very few people, I'm not saying you don't work hard, but very few people do physical labor these days compared to we used to. So we're eating the same. I always say, like, we're eating like marathon runners and we're not running marathons. It's going to get you into trouble. And that's going to cause chronic fatigue. Because what's your body going to do with 10, 15 times more complex sugar than your body needs to function? It's going to store it as fat. It's going to store it. It's going to store it for later. And it's going to bog you down. And then when you're bogged down, what happens? You're depressed. You're unmotivated. You don't want to leave the house. You don't want to exercise. You don't want to do anything you're supposed to do. Except eat more. Thank you. So people with chronic fatigue syndrome, at home, depressed, don't want to leave the house, and eat more. And again, this is why we're in the state that we're in. So we have to find motivation. Like, I'm big on, of course, finding God and finding motivation and finding a reason to get out of the house and just not be lethargic. That has to be first. You have to have a heart change to actually desire to pursue something better than you sitting at home on the couch. You actually have to find purpose in life. But you also have to get your body healthy, because when your body's healthier, you feel better and you want to get out of the house and you feel like you can do things. You feel like you can accomplish things. And so it just creates that negative down spiral. Food is such a big thing that can just send us into the pit. It's like, can be completely life-giving, or it can be completely detrimental, body, soul, and spirit. And that's something a lot of Christians don't talk about. The body of Christ does not address the food problem. And again, if chronic fatigue syndrome is not of God's design, then we have to do something to choose out of our own brokenness or the system that's causing us to feel this way. So, what was I talking about? Nutrition. I always get off on tangents. Okay, so nutrition. Sugars and grains. Complex sugar molecules make you depressed, make you gain weight. There's no such, like I always say this, like if you're a healthy person and you exercise and you feel amazing and they're the weight you want to be and you're mentally focused and you love God and everything's going well, there is a such thing as healthy sugar. If you did a little honey, a little maple syrup, you ate fruit, you ate some oatmeal once in a while, you're good. If anybody's struggling with weight, depression, any diagnosed disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, there is no such thing as healthy sugar. There's no such thing as healthy carbs or healthy bread. And I'm pretty adamant about that. Because people get in these situations where they're struggling with their health like chronic fatigue and they're like, okay, well, I know I feel horrible when I eat ice cream and cookies all day. So they start buying sprouted bread and gluten-free cookies and gluten-free bread and, on down the list, right? And they don't feel better. They don't get better. They might feel better like in their mind that they're choosing healthier choices, but body's not getting better. Why? Because their adrenals already aren't working. Their hormones aren't working. Their body's congested and toxic. You're not going to just switch to a healthier version of something that probably got you there in the first place and get well. So this is kind of the trap of, health food stores and the gluten-free section of the store. And I just really encourage people to stay away from all that stuff because it's not going to get you better. So I really have to highlight that with grains and sugars. What you want to do is you want to eat fruits because those are energy and they're not complex sugar molecules and they're quick energy, quick fuel source. They don't tax and stress the system anywhere near as bad as all the complex grains and sugars do. So what's a complex grain and sugar, just in case we don't know? All grains. All grains. That includes rice. Barley, rye, oats, wheat, all grains are complex sugar molecules. I had a lady, I have to tell this story just because I thought it was so cool. Antidepressants, 20 years, struggling, stopped eating grains, 3 days, felt amazing, stopped taking her medication, never had a problem since. Now, if there's 50,000 stories like hers, where the heck is the medical community with any information that actually helps people? It's sick. If you don't think we have a twisted, evil medical system, you got to wake up. we have been so deceived. And people are struggling and they're dying. They're dying. So we gotta eat well. We gotta eat well. That's my point, I guess, is we gotta eat well because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in how we feel. I have to address caffeine. I'm sorry. I just gotta do it, right? If you have chronic fatigue syndrome, you're struggling to get out of bed every day. You're struggling to make it through the afternoon. If you like to drink coffee and you do it just because you like it and it's a social thing and I can live without it, A, you're either like deceived or you're fooling yourself, or B, it's actually true and you do okay with a little bit of coffee, but that's not the majority of people. But if you have chronic fatigue syndrome, the last thing you should be doing is stimulants of any sort. Because your hormones aren't working. Your adrenals are crashing. Your body's congested. Caffeine is going to maybe help you make it through the day and feel like you might survive the day. I get it. I get it. You're a mom. You're diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. You got 4 kids. You're living on coffee. Okay, I get it. But find a way to heal your body. The answer isn't coffee and antidepressants. You got to restore life force to the body. And you can do that. So we have to talk about caffeine. We have to get off of coffee. If you want to do some green tea, That's okay. Black tea is really high in caffeine. But if you do some green tea once in a while, I'll often give people, I'll actually do that with some people who are really struggling with energy and really weak and not feeling good. I'll give them green tea to take in the afternoon, like a matcha green tea. They can take the capsules or something in the afternoon just to give them a little boost to help through the day. That's okay. That's okay. But we got to make wholesale lifestyle changes for people to get out of this chronic fatigue type of situation. So what do we really need to eat, especially when it comes to fatigue? Again, the body's a factory. Okay? You put in ice cream, donuts, junk food, obviously you're polluting your factory. Okay? If you're trying to get a finished good that's like a quality product, you're getting about 5%, and the rest of the 95%, you're totally polluting the environment with all your waste, right? I mean, if you want to think of it as a factory. As opposed to if we're clean, efficient, like if we're using the premium unleaded, like super, I don't know what all that stuff is, but you know what I'm saying? Like you're putting the best stuff in your car, your factory, the best raw materials, your efficiency is better. Your waste is less. The output is greater. That's energy. That's life force. This is why people, when they change their diet, they start to feel better. And you know what they do? They feel better just long enough to get the pain away or to get the weight off, and then they go right back to their junk. I've done it. I couldn't even count how many times I've done it. Okay? So it's not about feeling guilty about it. It's not about feeling ashamed about it. But it's about knowing that God has higher value and higher purpose for you, and that you better have your eyes on Him or you're never going to get there. You're going to keep falling back, and you're going to keep falling back, because without Him, we're nothing. So I really, really encourage people to just keep going after it. I mean, I jokingly say this, but I'm really serious about it. God is jealous for us. I mean, we're made in His image. He wants us to thrive. He doesn't want us to have sickness and disease. God is not in the way of our healing. God is never in the way of anybody's ability to get better. Who's in the way? I am. I'm in my own way. Now, it's also because we have a lack of wisdom, a lack of revelation, a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, especially in our medical community. We've been deceived by marketing and advertising and food companies and blah, blah, blah. But when you learn the truth will set you free if you choose the truth. Learning the truth means that there has to be action behind it. When I read the Bible and learn how to steward my finances or treat my wife well, I can read it in the Bible, but I actually have to do it, right? And it's the same thing with nutrition. And if you have chronic fatigue or any of these issues, like once you learn food actually really matters, like what we eat and what we put in our factories and how efficiently it's going to work based on how we treat it, you have to choose into that. You have to choose life. So again, God never is in the way of our healing. It's impossible for Him because the makeup of who He is healing. He knows nothing else. He knows nothing else but perfection and holiness and life. He's the author of life. Like death entered the world because of sin, because of man's choices. But what I encourage people to do is to choose life in this age, not wait. I don't want somebody diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. Oh, I got chronic fatigue. There's nothing I can do. I'm on an antidepressant. Well, I love Jesus, so I'll be with Him forever. Okay, right? And that's true if you really love Jesus. But that's not God's intention for your life. God's intention for your life is that you break free of sickness and disease. That we're set free. And that only comes by choosing. That only comes by choosing God and choosing life. What was I talking about? Nutrition. Nutrition. Yeah. So we got to eat good. Got to drink water, because God didn't make soda pop or a lot of the other funny things we drink. He made coffee beans. Let's just not be silly and go crazy about it, especially if you have chronic fatigue syndrome. You cannot live on false stimulants and get better. Your body can only last so long, and it's going to fail, and then you're just going to be worse off than you were before. Okay, so let's finish up the So I want to talk nutrition because I think that's important. Okay, depression, chronic fatigue, it doesn't matter what issue you have, nutrition's number one. And it's the main thing the medical community still, ignores. Hippocrates said, let your food be your medicine be your food. My gosh, we've known this since forever. So nutrition is crucial to you feeling better. So again, think the factory example. Think of the cells in your body, get a visual. What are you feeding your cells? What kind of environment are your cells living in? You can study cells. You can spend your whole life studying cells. They're factories. They take in nutrients and they spit out waste. And they take in nutrients and they spit out waste. These little kind of things you can't even see with your eye. So what kind of nutrition is it taking in and what kind of waste is it spitting out? I talk about this in more detail when you talk about cancer, but the ultimate toxicity condition in the human body is cancer. Again, not God's intention, but it's toxicity of the human body. It's the cells being surrounded by waste. And if you study the cells, nutrients in, waste out, the nutrients are needed and the waste must be expelled so that the body can produce energy. Energy is produced at the cellular level. It's something called ATP. We've learned all this stuff in science. ATP, that's where your energy comes from. Oxygen increases ATP. Why were antioxidants and resveratrol and all these berries so popular? Because they're known to increase ATP. CoQ10 increases ATP in the cells. So we have to eat well. I just can't stress it enough. We have to eat well. So fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds. Genesis 1:29, all seed-bearing plants shall be your food. Meat, lean meats. Leviticus 11, clean and unclean meats. I believe in that. Not because it's legalistic, because I think God's smarter than I am. And he said not to eat these animals because of the way he designed them to clean the earth. Not work well in my body. So I think that's just wisdom. Okay, so hormones, adrenals. So how do you boost your adrenals? I'm going to give you a couple of ideas of some things I've used for years. I gave the chronic fatigue syndrome little handout thing. The first 10 are actually from the notes from the adrenal class. Just because if you take care of your adrenals, you'll have more energy, you'll have more life force, and you'll feel better. So I talk about sun. I'll just go over them briefly. I'm pretty clueless on my time here. Okay, so sunshine. Sunshine's crucial for the hormones and for the endocrine system. People feel happy when they go outside. They get serotonin going. All hormones are produced as a cascade of light getting into the eyes. Stimulates the pineal gland, which is the light receptor, which triggers all the other hormones to produce, or all the other glands to produce hormones. Fertility issues, you need to be in the sun. Depression, you need to be in the sun. We know that. We know the sun makes us happy. We want to get outside. But again, you got chronic fatigue syndrome, you stay inside all day, you watch TV, you eat, and you don't even go outside. This is bad. This is bad. I'm being kind of goofy today, I don't know why. So, all right, so we got to get outside, we got to get in the sun. It's crucial for hormone production, which is crucial for the adrenals. Salt, I kind of mentioned it. The adrenals run on water and salt. People are sodium deficient. Why? Because we eat table salt, because we eat packaged foods. And because of stress and anxiety and sweating, exercising, a lot of people have run marathons for years, and then they end up getting totally wiped out. They didn't know about replenishing their minerals. I met a guy who did bike rides 20 miles every day, and he never took supplements, never took minerals, never took electrolytes, nothing. I don't know how he made it as long as he did. But he needs minerals. Like he's cramping and all these horrible things are going on. You'd think it'd be so obvious. But again, it just shows that this information obviously isn't ready available, or we would know all this stuff. Adrenal Fatigue Fighter, one of my favorite formulas by Ridgecrest. Adrenal Fatigue Fighter. I've seen a lot of people just get perked up from that. And the same company, Ridgecrest, they have a product called Thyroid Thrive. And same thing. Low thyroid can cause fatigue as well. So I'm into supporting the adrenals and the thyroid, especially again with chronic fatigue. Vitamin C, I mentioned the earthing sheets. I won't get into detail about that, but the earthing sheets, that's connecting to God through nature, being outside. It's invigorating, right? Go to a mountain stream where the water's about 40 degrees and put your bare feet in it. It's invigorating, right? That's supposed to be a joke. But it's invigorating, right? So connecting to God through nature is huge. And the earthing sheets is just a way to bring that inside of your home. Holy basil's my favorite for stress and anxiety. Keeping your blood sugars balanced. I do want to touch on that related to nutrition. A lot of people with chronic fatigue, again, they have a weak immune system, which we're going to get to. They have a weak immune system. They might have infections. They have weak adrenals. They can't live on vegetables. They really struggle. And again, this is a thing I learned through, like, people are eliminating foods. They feel junky. Everything they eat feels bad. They eat grains. They feel bad. They eat dairy. They eat bad. They eat all this stuff. They feel bad because their body's congested. It's not working. And they feel like the only thing they can eat is vegetables, and you can't live on vegetables. Well, maybe you can. I don't know, but it's tough. And people have blood sugar issues. Their blood sugars are going meh, 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 meh. And so it's kind of that vicious cycle. What makes them feel good? Sugar, grains, caffeine, like all the stuff they're not supposed to have, right? Makes them feel good. That's what happens when we're sick, is we crave the things. Like, have you ever heard that? We crave and desire the things that are attributing to our sickness and disease. Whatever we crave and we want and we can't live without is what's making us sick. Because if we weren't craving something, we'd be satisfied, we'd be happy, and we'd be okay. But we're not. We're craving things. So balancing blood sugars is really important with somebody with chronic fatigue. So you have to eat a little bit of protein with your meals. Fish, chicken, almonds, eggs. You have to eat a little bit of fat. And I would actually choose the fat over the meat, just because the meat, overdoing that can be acidic and cause issues with kidneys and other things, especially when we talk about detox. But olives, olive oil, avocado, a few almonds, and fruits and vegetables. Like, it doesn't sound that hard, right, to eat fruits and vegetables and almonds and avocado and olives. And like, God made a lot of good things. But it's so hard for us to not eat sugar and grains, and it's just stuff we shouldn't eat. So, but that'll keep your blood sugars balanced. If you have to eat every 2 to 3 hours, okay. But get some fat, get some protein in there, keep your blood sugars balanced and keep them stable. Because that'll keep you from needing caffeine, craving, and because when you're tired, you'll eat anything. So you really got to keep it stable. All right, so let's move on to, let me see if I touched on all that. I think so. Let's move on to the immune system and viral issues. And so this is commonly what happens. And I'm not saying this is the scenario for everybody, but I'm saying this is a common scenario. People notice that things aren't 100%. Their immune system's not great, but they're functioning. Everything's fine. They're probably doing the caffeine sugar thing, because who hasn't? And they're kind of functioning okay. And then they get sick. And nothing's the same after they got sick. I've seen this in my office. I can guarantee you, anybody who watches this video, if they've been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, know this story, because it's happened many, many times. Now, you weren't in the greatest health to begin with, but you were making it by. But that viral infection, that strep throat you caught, that flu virus you got, that whatever you caught was the straw that broke the camel's back. Your immune system was already weak. The virus basically took over your whole body systemically, and you can't beat it. So people are living with systemic, I call it a systemic low-grade infection in their bodies. If you feel junky all the time, and you never feel good, and you never have energy, and you never have life force, whether you get sick a lot or not, because I know people who struggle with these issues are like, I never get sick. That can be a bad thing, actually, too. But we have systemic low-grade infections. And we know people have infections because antibiotics are everywhere and for everything, and people are getting sick, and sinus infections and yeast infections and urinary tract infections, and we're handing out antibiotics to everybody. But a lot of times people catch a virus or some bacterial infection or something, and they're never the same after that. And so that's why even the Mayo Clinic mentions the viral infections as a trigger, whatever you want to call it, for what we'd call this syndrome, again, which isn't really mean anything, chronic fatigue. It just means your body's congested, toxic, and probably has some hormonal imbalances. And so you just need to change your life a little bit. Start with nutrition, absolutely number one. Balance your hormones, because it'll make you happier, and it'll make you feel better and give you drive and motivation and actually feel like you can make it through. And I didn't get into all the specific ones, but if I mention a couple, and I have videos on them specifically, but happiness is serotonin. We have stuff called Happy Juice. Boost your serotonin. It's got St. John's wort and some other things in it. Dopamine levels. L-DOPA, that's your drive, that's your motivation. That's really high in mucuna pruriens. It's an herb called mucuna. People take it for depression. How about DHEA, the joy hormone? Highest known natural source is pine pollen. DHEA. You can take deer antler. I have a formula that I have called the Great Adapter. That's a blend of Chinese tonic herbs that help balance the adrenals. So you can take things like God gave us things for our body and for our hormones because He loves us. I can safely say that there's not a pharmaceutical drug on the market that God made. God's been replaced. And we wonder why we're all still sick. Because God has been replaced in our medical industry. He was actually kicked out about 1950. So for about 66 years, that's an interesting number, about 66 years, we have not had, was that, I don't know if that was a divine moment or not, but we have not had God in our medical industry. Because every herbalist, every naturopath, every homeopath, every chiropractor was kicked out by the 1950s. Chiropractors clawed their way back in. But that's about it. Everybody else is, unproven. So anyway, back to the immune system. So we have to strengthen our immune system. How do you do that? First thing is diet. Because you're either contributing to the problem or you're actually putting things in your body that are life-giving that can heal your body. And infectious organisms, not only do sugars and carbs cause the carbohydrate coma, the stress on the body, the fatigue, but it feeds infectious organisms. So if you got low-grade, viral bacterial issues, they're fed by eating these types of foods. Dairy, grains, sugar, always the big three. I always stress those three: dairy, grains, and sugar. Dairy, grains, and sugar. No such thing as a healthy grain. No such thing as a healthy sugar. No such thing as healthy dairy. I don't care how raw it is, how much yummy grass the cow ate and never got injected with any hormones. It's still dairy that congests the human body that nobody with chronic fatigue syndrome can process. You cannot process. You cannot process it. So we got to get away from it. So dairy, grains, and sugar, I'm just going to keep stressing those. And again, I'll repeat myself because I think it's important. This is where the total misunderstanding comes from I didn't understand this, so many people don't understand this. Why can't we eat good, clean things God gave us? I'm not eating McDonald's. I'm drinking raw milk. We've been drinking raw milk for thousands of years. We haven't had the level of sickness and disease and toxicity, and we haven't had chronic fatigue syndrome for thousands of years. We haven't had children being diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. We do now. Because we're being born toxic because of the choices of our parents and our grandparents. And we sit back and go, well, Grandma and Grandpa lived into their 90s and they were perfectly healthy. I'm sorry, but they started it. They were smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and eating donuts. But we were stronger 4 or 5 generations ago. And we're getting weaker and weaker and weaker each generation. So we have to change it. We have to make changes. So the first step in healing the immune system is eating nutritious foods that aren't contributing to more sickness and disease and congestion. And then we have to strengthen the immune system. And you can take all kinds of great things for the immune system, and I can rattle you off a list. But I tell people I work with, do not waste your money on the best stuff for your immune system if you're just going to wreck it by eating junk. I mean, that's the medical mindset. Eat what you want, do what you want. Nutrition doesn't really matter that much. Here, take this antibiotic, everything will be okay. Here, take this antidepressant, it'll balance out your mood, everything will be okay. Well, nothing's okay in this land. Everything is messed up. Everything is backwards. So we have to, we have to choose foods that aren't feeding into these issues. So, and the supplements can help, but they help when you're aligning with what's going on in your body and not making it worse through your lifestyle choices. See, the whole reason, like, I talk about this stuff is to bring glory to God. To put God back at his rightful place in medicine as the creator of all things and the only one that can heal us. I don't want his good name, okay, being blemished by people saying that natural supplements don't work. Does that make sense? Because this stuff works. The pharmaceutical drugs don't work. They make people worse. But what people do is they live a poor lifestyle. They don't eat well. They come in here and expect oregano to fix everything. Well, oregano can fix a lot, even when you're not doing the right stuff. Okay, so can garlic and all these things, because God's so powerful. The things he's made are so powerful. But if you actually change your diet, start exercising every day, and take these things God made you, it's impossible for you not to get better. That's what I love about what I do, and that's what I love about God. He's never in the way of us getting better. All he wants is for us to get better. And so the things he made will help you get well. And so when I see people and they get well and they say, thank you, I say, thanks to God, right? Because he's the one that healed you. I didn't do anything. I just talk. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. Sometimes I know what I'm saying, sometimes I have no idea what I'm saying. Sometimes I look back at my videos and go, I can't believe I ever said that. It's just part of being human. Just going to do the best we can, but hopefully it helps some people. But the things God made heal people. And so what I really want is for us to be healed and us to be well and us to not have chronic fatigue syndrome and say, thank you, God. And to get closer to God, your creator, knowing that there was a way out of it when the system doesn't give you a way out. Because that system isn't a way out, it's a death trap. Uncomfortable pause.
I agree.
I know, it's just hard, like, it's so hard because, again, there's that 1% of the great stuff that they're doing out there and saving people alive and helping people, but so much of it is so full of deceit and deception and just not getting people better. So it's a slippery slope. But you don't have to do that much to choose God. I mean, you change your diet, but so many people and so many Christians still have no concept or idea or understanding that it matters what you eat. I mean, you still go to church services. We're talking spirit-filled, Jesus-loving people who eat junk. There's no logic to it. There's no common sense anymore. You know, I just think about the great people of the Bible. I mean, Daniel aligned his heart with his God and postured his heart not to eat the king's delicacies over 2,000 years ago. Daniel did not have to opt out of eating Twizzlers, Doritos, and Coca-Cola. Yet he chose to align his heart with his God in eating the healthiest, nutritious food when they didn't even have processed foods. Yet today we got garbage that's destroying people. Everybody around us is sick and dying. Christians are dying. Christians have cancer and thousands of people are praying for them to be healed and they're not getting healed. Is God not like to do miracles? He loves to do miracles. But he's also waiting for people to wake up. And we will continue on a path of destruction until we wake up. I don't know why I'm getting this intense on a chronic fatigue syndrome class, but I really care about this stuff. I really want people to be closer to God when they've been struggling with chronic fatigue for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, no answers, on antidepressants, on the verge of like, why do I even exist? And in 2 weeks, they're a brand new creation because they changed their diet, they took the things that God made, they got new motivation in life, and they're like, praise God. I've seen those stories. I personally know people, and I've worked with people who have had those stories happen. All glory and honor to God. So, back to infections. So, I was saying you can take all kinds of great supplements that boost the immune system. You know, you can take medicinal mushrooms, chaga and reishi mushroom. You can take olive leaf extract, very biblical, super amazing. It's one of the most powerful healing things on the planet. There's thousands of herbs I could mention that boost and heal your immune system. No pharmaceutical drug boosts your immune system. They all suppress your immune system. You know, that's their answer. That's their answer for cancer and autoimmune diseases, is let's make your body sicker, let's suppress your immune system, let's make your body weaker. So there's all kinds of great things that you can do to boost your immune system, but the nutrition has to be in line. And I think the single most important thing that you can do is to cleanse. And again, this is something completely ignored by our medical community. And the reason is it's ignored by our medical community because if people actually cleansed, people would get well. The medical industry does not want anybody well. If we have 300 million people in America and 280 million of them are well and don't need drugs and don't need surgery and don't need hospitals, well, there's a lot of billions of dollars lost and a lot of people that don't have jobs. So the medical industry doesn't want people well, it wants people sick. You know, that's why it's like one thing I always say, it's like, if you want to pull up the American Diabetes Association and follow their program, that's great. You'll be a diabetic your whole life. That's what they want. Because metformin and insulin shots make them approximately X number of dollars a year, and they know how much that money is. So they need customers. So God wants freedom, health, life for all people. He will do it through miracles, but He'll also do it as we say, yes, Papa, I'm going to change the way I live. I'm going to change the way I eat. I'm going to strengthen my immune system. I'm going to cleanse this holy temple. I'm going to cleanse this holy temple. Because that's the reality of it. If we polluted our bodies, we polluted our temples. I could give you all kinds of scriptures for it. Jeremiah said, we are broken vessels that can hold no water. You know, Jesus talks about renewing, getting new wineskin, not putting old wine into old wineskins. I mean, you can reference all this stuff to our health and our physical bodies. 2 Corinthians 7:1 talks about cleansing ourselves from all filthiness of flesh and spirit. Why do we only talk about spirit? Why don't we ever recognize the fact that we're body, soul, and spirit, and we're living, fleshly human creatures on this earth for right now? And we're subject to the laws of God's creation and design. It's because we've not believed that or heard that or been educated on that that we're perishing in such high numbers. But we are to cleanse ourselves, and that includes our physical bodies. Because cleansing out waste out of the body restores life force. The oxygen comes back, the water comes back, the cells can breathe again, the hormones get produced again, the joy hormone starts to get produced again, the happiness like serotonin, like all those things can start to function again when the factory's working better. No more chronic fatigue. Yay, God is good. So we have to cleanse. So that's the highlight. Balance your hormones, eat nutritious foods, cleanse your body. I mean, it sounds like a super complicated formula, right? Like, it's really not. It's really not. What's hard is that people have been struggling for so long and so many years and they don't see a way out. Like they'll get a little bit better and then they slip back and get a little bit better and they slip back. Or, they try some natural things and they don't feel like they're getting any better and we just kind of quit and give up. I've been through all that and I know so many people have. So cleansing is crucial. If you have a systemic infection in your body, a viral infection, it has an environment in which it can live. A toxic, acidic body has an environment in which it can live. I mean, you got a trash can and it's filled with trash. Eventually it attracts things in it that aren't good and they live in there. And so you have to change the trash. And we have to change our bodies and we have to change our filters in our car. We have to clean our bodies. We got to clean our fish tank. We got to clean our factory once in a while. So that's really the key to health. The key to health is cleansing our bodies. I mean, how else do we explain sickness and disease? Random, just strikes certain people at certain times. Like God really isn't that great because we just get sick all the time. Like how do we actually explain the human condition and why we're so full of sickness and disease? How do we explain what happened to our friends and our relatives who are getting heart disease and diabetes and cancer? How do we explain it if it's not toxicity of the human body? I don't have another explanation for it. And it's interesting because that's what every natural healer all throughout history preached. Hippocrates said, for all patient complaints, look to the spine and look to the bowels. Why? Because the spine and the bowels connect to nerves that connect to every single part of the body. So if your spine's aligned and your bowels are clean, your whole body will be well. And you can go on through the list of all these natural health practitioners that found a toxic body is the key to health. And again, find one medical doctor that actually promotes cleansing. In fact, they're trained the opposite. Enemas are dangerous. You could perforate your colon. You're going to lose all your minerals. I mean, all this stuff. It's not true, but people believe it. People believe it because we believe doctors. They get paid lots of money so that you believe everything that they say. Well, it's time we shift our mindset into actually researching God and finding out what's real and what's not really real and what can really help people. So cleansing is key. Starts with the colon. Okay, Dr. Bernard Jensen wrote a book called Death Begins in the Colon. I mean, what a pleasant name for a book. Death begins in the colon. But it really is. That's why it matters what we eat. That's why what you eat matters your brain. Like if you eat something and it makes you feel good, or if you eat something and you get headache, why? Because it's what you eat, what you put in your gut affects every single part of your body. What's the first thing that forms in a womb when a baby's being formed in the womb? The colon, the intestinal tract. Everything buds off of the intestinal tract. So you got to have a healthy, clean gut and colon. I mean, where do we think prostate and colon cancer comes from? It can only come from what we choose to put in our colon and in our body. And I just have to stress this stuff again because so many Christians are confused and not understanding why we have sickness and disease, why God isn't fixing everything, why everybody's not getting healed through the miracles. And we have to align with creation. We have to align with God and creation. That is key. So colon's first. Kidney cleansing is crucial. Colon and kidneys, probably the two most important things you can keep clean and keep healthy if your body wants to get better. Because the colon filters out all the large waste, obviously, we know that. But the kidneys filter all fluid waste out of the body. And the garbage sewer system of the body, whatever you want to call it, is the lymphatic system. And the lymph is a fluid system that drains through the kidneys. And the job of the lymph is to filter all the waste out of the body to keep the blood healthy, because the life of all flesh is in the blood. Leviticus 17. The blood sustains its life. So without healthy blood, no health in the body. Without a healthy colon and kidneys, no healthy organs, congested lymph, no healthy lymph, no clean blood. Toxic blood, you're in trouble. You've been diagnosed with anemia because of a blood test. You've had anemia for years before you got diagnosed with a blood test. Because the life of all flesh is in the blood, so God is a pretty smart designer, and he will pull anything and everything from every other gland, organ, tissue, or bone of your body to keep your blood healthy. That's why a blood test is and is not a good test. It is a good test to see what's really, 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 really going wrong, because it's the last thing that will start to show problems. But it's a horrible test to find out what's going on, with people's actual health. Because you know how many people come in and they're like, I got this, I got a laundry list of symptoms, and like, my blood comes back perfect every time. The doctor tells me nothing's wrong with me. Or what? It's all in your head, right? So this is, again, just part of the fallacy of the medical system. But again, there's freedom in God. There's freedom in just doing those basic things, in cleansing out our bodies, eating nutritious foods, balancing our hormones. And anybody with chronic fatigue syndrome can be set free by God by choosing those things. And we can get out of the system that's making us sick. Again, regardless of our past, regardless of our history, regardless of how bad you think your situation is. There's always a God who's bigger. Amen? Amen. Has it been an hour?
Hour 15 minutes.
Did I? Oh, okay. All right, so any questions? Yes.
I'm wondering if, when you were talking about how salt is so good for the adrenals, and for me right now, I'm staying off of the salt, so does dulse or some other things do the same thing as that hemorrhoid?
Ooh, good question. Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So she talked about salt, and I talked about salt for the adrenals. But when we're cleansing, and like we're cleansing on the kidneys, it's really best to avoid inorganic minerals. And even sea salt is an inorganic mineral, so it's best to get salt and minerals from food, which you will not find a lot of salt sources in food. This is why you throw a salt lick out on the pasture and all the animals go, right? The best source of natural sodium is celery. And so eating celery, juicing celery. Celery is, I learned this from Dr. Ellen Tart-Jensen. I haven't researched it, but she says the celery juice is the closest in constituents to lymph fluid. And it's one of the best things for cleansing and healing our lymph. And celery also looks like bone. It's one of the best known things for strengthening bone. And it also has a lot of natural high sodium, which isn't found in a lot of foods. So juicing is probably where you'd get the most natural sodium from celery. And then yes, like you mentioned, the other thing would be like dulse, kelp, nori, any of those seaweeds. And yeah, they're going to be, it's not like taking straight ocean minerals. It's actually in the plant, so it'd be a better source. But I think celery is probably the best source of natural sodium. Okay, anything else? You go first.
Sorry. You said licorice root can help increase blood sugar blood pressure.
Yes.
And I just had a question about if you already have low blood pressure, like I heard somewhere about chia seeds can lower them. Do you know about that? Like, is that something that's not helpful or not true? Or
I don't know the answer to that. She asked me if chia seeds lower blood pressure. I have no response. I've never heard that.
Okay. I'll go look it up.
Yeah, I don't see how it would. Like logically, just thinking of chia seeds and what they are and what they do, it wouldn't make any sense to me that they would. But I haven't heard that for sure.
Yeah, that was something that I heard. I haven't
okay.
researched, so that's why
okay.
I was like, I wanted to know.
Yeah, I really don't know.
Okay.
Sorry. Julie?
You said to eat fruit, especially the berries or whatever, in the morning, but that tends to increase my appetite all day. Is it actually that, or am I just thinking that? It just seems like fruit tends to increase my appetite.
It's probably true. It's hard to say. She said fruit increases her appetite. One thing you can do is have some fat with it just to balance things out. Have some avocado. It's like if you make a smoothie, you could just put avocado in it. But fats will help balance that. Because yeah, if you eat fruit, it's quick energy, quick sugar, quick fuel, in, out. You're hungry again in an hour.
Yeah.
It's not very sustaining, so.
And that's okay to do it on the cleanse?
That's okay to do it as part of a cleanse, yeah. You just might have to eat fruit every hour or two while you're cleansing. Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
And with or without the avocado then, if I'm doing it every hour or two?
If you're doing it every hour or two and you're cleansing, you don't have to do it with the avocado. If you're just trying to balance blood sugars, your blood sugars are weak, you eat fruit, you're starving again an hour later, you can either like add avocado to the fruit or just avoid it and just eat like vegetables with fats or vegetables with a little protein or something like that.
And so we can live on vegetables alone during a cleanse?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's people like, I read about this guy one time who did a juice fast for 9 months.
Well, I
So
mean, I did a cleanse for 30 days.
you can do it.
Only vegetables. But
Yeah, you can do it. Yep. Do you have a question?
On the, you list, if you want to do a serious cleanse, this is from your cancer flyer.
Yeah.
And today you mentioned it too, with like, do the colon cleanse first, then the kidneys, then the lymph. How long, and can you simultaneously do those?
Good question. So it's how long to cleanse and can you simultaneously do them? I can't give you a good answer just because, how do you know how long? Some people have 20 years of Crohn's disease and diverticulitis and another person doesn't. So you really have to look at each individual situation. Now, can you do simultaneous cleanse? Sure. Sure. You can do a colon cleanse and do enemas and take things for the colon while you're taking kidney stuff, and you can kind of pair some things up for sure. But it really depends on the person's situation, so I can't give you a clear answer on it. Let's just say this. I mean, it might sound kind of obvious, but it depends on the person's situation. The person generally, they feel pretty good. They just want to lose a few pounds, and they might just make a few changes to a colon cleanse, lose 10 pounds, and feel amazing. Well, then you got somebody who's got chronic fatigue syndrome, or cancer. They might be cleansing for months and months and months. So it just depends on the situation. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
And you just mentioned earlier the DHEA and the pine pollen, but is DHEA made in the liver? Like if you kind of got other things functioning well in your body, is the DHEA going to be naturally produced? Does that make sense?
DHEA is produced in the adrenal
Oh,
glands.
is it? Okay. So
That's why the adrenals are so important.
So potentially if your adrenals are going well, then you don't necessarily need to put pine pollen or something in. If your adrenals are healthy, the DHEA will come out. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. If your adrenals are working, you should be producing DHEA. Correct.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Okay,
is
yeah.
pine pollen the only source of DHEA? If you buy it at a health food store, is it just going to be synthetic?
Yes. Yeah. When you buy DHEA and it says 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, 25 milligrams, it's all synthetic.
And good, bad, indifferent, don't take.
Oh, I don't like synthetics. I mean, people take it because they feel it. It makes them feel better. But the only natural source I know of direct DHEA is pine pollen.
Okay.
But you can also take just things for the adrenals, and they'll boost DHEA naturally. You can take ginseng and boost DHEA. You can take deer antler and boost DHEA, by taking things that stimulate and heal the adrenal glands. But the only direct source that I know of, I'm sure there's more, but it's the pine pollen. But anybody can take pine pollen because it's super nutritious and it's got tons of other good things in it. DHEA is just one. But okay, we'll see you next time.